Christian antisemitism in the Middle Ages and the Reformation. Antisemitism is a modern word describing prejudice and hostility toward Jews and Judaism. Christian antisemitism began in the Gospels, rooted in the story of a first-century Jewish preacher, Jesus of Nazareth, in Roman Judea. The Gospels describe the trial and crucifixion of Jesus, suggesting he died over religious disputes with Jewish leaders, not as a traitor to Rome. Early Christians claimed Jesus and his followers were persecuted by Jews. This claim became a core justification for later Christian violence against Jews. In the early modern era, this was combined with ideas about race and behavior. Early Christianity. When the first Christian missionaries took Jesus' message across Eastern Roman cities, more Gentiles than Jews wanted to join. This sparked debate. Did Gentile Christians need to adopt Jewish rituals like circumcision or dietary laws? Some Jewish Christians insisted they must. But Paul's letters and the Acts of the Apostles argued otherwise. These texts introduced ideas like faith and the atonement of Jesus' death, helping to define Christianity as separate from Judaism. By the 2nd century, Jewish resistance to the new faith led Christian bishops to write adversos, texts attacking Jews as enemies. They reused Gospel and Pauline arguments, claiming Jews who once persecuted Jesus still opposed Christians. These texts offered no evidence of real-life persecution, but they were used for centuries to justify violence against Jews. Jewish-Christian relations in late antiquity. After Constantine's conversion, he legalized Christianity across the empire with the Edict of Milan. The empire didn't convert overnight, but Constantine offered tax breaks and church funding. At the Council of Nicaea, a creed defined Christian beliefs, now backed by state power. Later, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the empire's only legal religion. Pagan temples were destroyed or turned into churches, and the word pagan became a slur for non-Christians. Theodosius' laws didn't target Jews directly, but Jewish life grew more restricted under later emperors. Under Justinian, the old Roman laws were revised and codified. Jews were banned from proselytizing, violators were burned at the stake. Jews couldn't attack Jews who converted to Christianity. They couldn't own Christian slaves or circumcise them. Doing so meant freeing them. Christians who converted to Judaism lost all property. Synagogues were protected, but Hebrew was banned. Interfaith marriage was banned as adultery. Jewish courts lost their authority. Jews were barred from law and medicine. Jews, pagans, and heretics couldn't publicly debate Christians. Jewish Christian sects were labeled heretical back in 325 and stayed banned. John Chrysostom, Bishop of Antioch, preached fiercely against Jews in 387. Upset that some Christians still attended synagogue, he compared synagogues to brothels and called their worship like rutting pigs. Yet these attacks also reveal a truth. In many parts of the empire, ordinary Christians still mingled with Jews, celebrated together, and shared meals. Sadly, John's hateful sermons were preserved and later used in medieval Europe. In the late Roman Empire, invading tribes like the Goths and Huns, though Christian, followed Arian teachings and were seen as heretics. Enforcement of anti-Jewish laws varied with each emperor. In 415, after the bones of Saint Stephen were found in Jerusalem, relics were sent across the empire. On the island of Minorca, the Christian community burned the local synagogue, marking the first recorded forced baptism of Jews. Jews in medieval Europe. With the rise of the papacy under Leo I and the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne, the Catholic Church came to dominate government and daily life across Europe. Jewish-Christian relations varied during this time, depending on the current Pope and Holy Roman Emperor. Pope Urban II called for the first Christian crusade to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. Christians were promised absolution if they joined the cause. Many never made it to the Holy Land, yet some saw fighting for Christ as justification for attacking local Jewish communities. Massacres occurred in cities like Worms, Trier, and Metz. In fact, more Jews were killed in the Rhineland than Muslims in the Holy Land. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council issued several declarations. Jews and Saracens must dress differently from Christians. Jews were banned from holding public office. Converts from Judaism could not retain Jewish customs. Accusations of blood libel, the myth that Jews used Christian children's blood in rituals, spread across Europe. Crises like the Black Death led to more massacres of Jewish communities. In 1231, Pope Gregory IX began the Episcopal Inquisition to combat heresy in southern France and the Balkans. Later, under Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, Spain's Inquisition targeted Jews and Muslims. The infamous Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada extended the ban to Marranos and Moriscos, Jewish and Muslim converts accused of secretly practicing their old faith. Jews and Muslims were expelled from Spain in 1492. At this time, behavioral and racial theories entered the picture. Jews and Muslims were seen as inherently different, even after conversion. These ideas spread through Europe and were tied to emerging racial theories as Europeans began to encounter indigenous peoples through global trade. In 1516, Venice created the first Jewish ghetto. Pope Paul IV established a similar ghetto in Rome and declared there was no salvation outside the church. The Middle Ages also shaped visual stereotypes of Jews: straggly beards, hooked noses, coin bags, and flashy clothes. Christian critics cited Deuteronomy 23 verse 19 against usury, even though Jews, denied many professions, were allowed to loan money. The gospel story of Jesus overturning the money changers' tables was twisted to suggest that Jews continued to oppress people. Judas' betrayal became a powerful image, reinforced in art and Easter Passion plays, which often fueled anti-Jewish violence. Reformation. From the 1300s through the 1500s, calls for church reform gained momentum. Thinkers like John Wycliffe and Jan Hus argued that the Bible should be available in local languages, not just Latin. Around 1450, Gutenberg's printing press helped spread these ideas rapidly. Martin Luther, born in 1483, was a German monk and theology professor. In 1517, he posted his 95 Theses, protesting indulgences and other abuses of the church. Luther taught that only the scriptures, sola scriptura, were a true source of divine knowledge. Salvation came through faith, sola fide, not through works, rituals, or clergy. For Luther, no one could mediate between God and humans except Christ. Luther's readings of Paul's letters emphasized salvation by faith, not by the works of the law. While Paul meant ritual laws distinguishing Jews and Gentiles, Luther interpreted it as referring to all of Judaism. He saw Judaism and Catholicism as locked in empty legalism. The church, like the Pharisees, had lost its way. Luther was excommunicated in 1521 after refusing to recant. He later married a former nun, rejecting clerical celibacy and the Catholic view of the sacraments. Another reformer, John Calvin in Geneva, also advanced these ideas. Both he and Luther upheld St. Augustine's doctrine of predestination, that God already knows who will be saved. Augustine had argued that, though Jews were wrong to reject Christ, their survival was necessary. They were witnesses to God's covenant and would one day convert, fulfilling prophecy. Early on, Luther shared Augustine's view. In 1523, he published that Jesus Christ was born a Jew, urging kindness toward Jews and hoping they would convert. He wrote, "If the apostles, who also were Jews, had dealt with us Gentiles as we deal with the Jews, there would never have been a Christian among the Gentiles. We are aliens and in-laws, they are blood relatives of our Lord." He criticized anti-Jewish laws and emphasized conversion by love, not force. But in 1536, when the Elector of Saxony banned Jews from his territory, Luther refused to intervene. Frustrated by what he saw as Jewish obstinacy, he reversed his earlier stance. In 1543, he published on the Jews and their lies, calling for burning synagogues and schools, destroying Jewish homes, confiscating religious texts, banning rabbis from teaching, restricting Jewish movement, forbidding money lending, forcing Jews to manual labor. Like church fathers before him, Luther's treatise lacked any real detail about Jewish life in medieval Germany. His rhetoric instead linked Jews to ancient curses and divine punishment. Luther's anti-Jewish writings have cast a long shadow. On the Jews and Their Lies was reprinted by the Nazis in 1937 and cited during Kristallnacht in 1938. Today, most Lutheran and Protestant churches have forcefully rejected Luther's views on Jews and Judaism.